We know, Father. Everyone knows. Just look at them.
Hey guys, Pete here. Today I'll be talking about episode 7 of House of the Dragon, which delivered some major incidents that book readers knew were coming, but still managed to be surprising by changing the details of the way it played out. Things are escalating quickly as we near the end of the first season, and Driftmark sets the stage for the rest of the series. So much happens in this episode that's all in service of these two big events. Aemond losing his eye as he claims the biggest, baddest dragon in Westeros and the aftermath of that, and this new union between the heir to the Iron Throne and her bad boy uncle. And it all works to create a point of no return for these main characters. There's also a lot happening on the side that will probably be wise to remember. Aegon's heavy drinking, Helaena playing with a spider and repeating things like full of green, full of black, dragons of flesh weaving dragons of thread. There's also the fact that these two are now betrothed. Remember when everyone discredited Otto's idea of having him marry his half-sister Rhaenyra? Well, it turns out he'll just be marrying his full sister instead. No half measures there for him. Larys is still hanging around and offering up his services to the queen. As much as she's on the outs with her Targaryen counterpart, she's got herself some guys between him and Kristen Cole that are both willing to go to great lengths to make sure she has what she needs. They were practically tripping over each other to cut out a child's eye. Viserys is still deteriorating, and Daemon still doesn't want any help from him, but they do have a short conversation for what we can expect is the first time in years. And Otto has returned to his role as Hand of the King. And from what we see, the years have not tempered the feelings between him and Daemon. The episode opens with a funeral. We see Laena's body return to the eternal waters off of the coast of Driftmark. This has brought everyone together, and they've all got something going on. Remember, Laena died in the last episode by dragon after complications during childbirth. So the Velaryons are all dealing with that, but we also lost Lionel and Harwin Strong, so Rhaenyra and her kids are dealing with that. There was one smaller moment here that stood out as encapsulating how the early part of this show is essentially a sequence of bad decisions and missed opportunities. Aemond walks up to this brazier at the same time Jace does, and isn't able to come up with anything to say, so he just walks away. It looked like there was something inside of him that was telling him to say a kind word or offer some support. They are being raised together, they do know what's going on in each other's lives generally. But they both recoiled when they were confronted with this uncomfortable situation. And based on what happens later, it does feel like it was the last chance for things to go differently. The funeral is a somber occasion for all involved, and as Viserys is going to bed, he accidentally calls Alicent Emma, which is his first wife's name, and it's a great illustration of just how disconnected this family is from each other, and how the thing that's keeping them together is falling apart right in front of them. After he's gone, Otto grabs up a nearly passed out Aegon and sends him to bed. Carl retrieves Laenor at Corlys's behest and does the same with him. And from there, everyone goes their separate ways. Rhaenys and Corlys have a very interesting conversation behind closed doors. She wants her husband to honor Laena by naming Baela the heir to Driftmark. She talks about blood and how Rhaenyra's sons are not theirs. But he doesn't want to cast more doubt on their legitimacy because that would undermine the power that he's worked so hard to cobble together and his authority. His wife is more concerned with the personal. She comes straight out and calls them bastards, and this leads to him saying that history doesn't remember blood, it remembers names, which is in line with what she said about him and his concern with legacy above all. This ties together perfectly with the last conversation we saw between them when they were worried about Laenor marrying Rhaenyra. And I love the dynamic they set up between these two, where she's able to identify his motivations better than he is, even if here he's not interested in hearing her and following her lead. Daemon and Rhaenyra walk on the beach and catch up, where she reveals a little more information about her relationship with Laenor. Apparently they tried to have children, but it didn't work. She says there was no joy in it, so she found that in her relationship with Harwin. The conversation turns to the how and the why of him leaving her all those years ago when she was still a child. Even though they both admit that they got something out of their relationships with Harwin and Laena, he says that they were happy enough. She says she enjoyed the being desired of it all and that she did trust him, and even laments that she should have stopped him from returning to Harrenhal. But you still get the sense that they both have been holding on to this idea of being together while all of that was going on. She brings up the curse of Harrenhal, which is something Larys mentioned to Alicent in the previous episode, and it is an interesting bit of lore that I won't get into here other than to say that several powerful houses that inhabited that castle have gone extinct. Daemon calls that a ghost story and steers the conversation towards the politics of what we're all starting to sense is going to happen between these two. He throws out the idea that he wouldn't be surprised if Otto and Alicent would use the story of the curse to their advantage, which is to say that they might kill the Hand of the King so that he could take his position back. But at this point, Rhaenyra doesn't believe the Queen is capable of cold murder. He responds that each of us is capable of depravity, more than you would believe, which feels like it could serve as foreshadowing, but also highlights the fact that there's a lot that they don't know about each other, which in his case includes things like killing his first wife, Rhea Royce. With all that out of the way, it finally happens. This time they actually go through with the coupling, and it looks like they both are very pleased with the results. In the meantime, Aemond takes his chance and claims Vhagar, which played out a lot differently than it did in the book and is much improved for TV in my opinion. There's so much tension in his approach, and it's in the back of our minds that this giant dragon has also just put its last rider out of her misery. In the book, he was spotted by the kids on his way to do this, so he essentially jumped on just to avoid getting caught. And here we see that he negotiates in a sense after Vhagar isn't keen on his approach in the beginning. He keeps it together, he straps in for a harrowing ride that he eventually gets the hang of, and the experience leaves him feeling like he's something special. All the weirdness and insecurities he felt around the other kids is washed away, and he emerges a dragon rider, where it seems notable that this is a Targaryen achieving what they believe to be their birthright. Baela and Rhaena heard this all going down and went to wake up Jace. This was their mother's dragon, and since Rhaena doesn't have one yet either, she was expecting to claim her. Jace, Luke, and the girls confront him, and Aemond takes the chance to rub it in their faces. As if he was checking off a list, he insults everyone in the most personal ways, and when they try to come at him, he uses his age and size advantage to smack them around a bit. They do get the upper hand briefly when they all team up on him, but that just takes things to the next level. After he gets free, he calls the boys bastards. In response to that, Jace pulls his blade, and then he gets smashed in the head with a rock. And then as Aemond is hovering over him, looking like he might actually kill him, his little brother Luke picks up the dagger and slashes him with it after Jace throws some dirt in his face. This is all rather brutal to watch, but what I really liked about it is the way that even in this small stakes affair, I mean, kids fight. It's a part of growing up. But when it's these particular kids who hold these positions in this society, things can go off the rails pretty quick. What follows is probably the best scene the show has put together. If you zoom out beyond the horror and carnage of him losing his eye, the aftermath really goes a long way to define what is happening inside this family, in the realm currently, and what this story is about. No one present in this giant room with all these witnesses is arguing their position in good faith. Rhaenyra learns that Aemond called her sons bastards and uses that to redirect Viserys' anger, knowing that she can push that button in her father and knowing full well that it's not an untrue accusation. Alicent tries to use the culture's idea that bastards are savage by nature to her advantage while trying not to cross the line that will turn her husband against her. And when he presses Aemond, it eventually falls on Aegon to say the quiet part out loud. Everyone knows, just look at them. This all makes me think back a few episodes where I said that it was interesting to see how their families are using these young women as pawns, and how striking it was to see them start to explore the power that they do have at their disposal. Now we see that come full circle to where Alicent and Rhaenyra are using the king as the pawn in the game that they're playing. This confrontation between the families is something I've been looking forward to seeing, and the trickiest part of it for me was always the cruelty required to expect an eye for an eye in a situation involving kids. It's not hard to imagine that a mother whose son has been violently maimed might say something impulsive and ultimately regrettable, but moving forward with actually extracting said eye yourself is another thing entirely. So this scene had to make that work, and I think it did. Alicent just needs to feel that no one is on her side and that what's happening is completely unjust. She has to have the feeling that things are slipping away from her in a way that it makes her desperate. If you go back and rewatch, you'll notice that Olivia Cooke does a fantastic job of expressing how this is building up over the conversation. When it all boils over, it's not so much exposing who she really is, as Rhaenyra implies later, but her breaking under the weight of the circumstances. The show is telling us that she's lost her mind in that moment, and while that in no way makes what she tried to do okay, it does work to make the fact that it happened at all make sense. The way that the line, "that isn't sufficient," lands justifies focusing so much on these two when they were younger in the first 5 episodes. And that also makes it feel a little bit awesome when she completely unloads the line about where is duty, where is sacrifice? It's trampled under your pretty foot again. As that just sort of oozes out of the dark place that she's built up inside of her, and then Rhaenyra returns fire with the perfect, exhausting wasn't it, hiding under the cloak of your own righteousness. And Rhaenyra is not completely wrong either. You can look at all the different things that Alicent has been doing to try to undermine the legitimacy of her claim. But she's also playing the game there, and because they know each other, she sensed that she could push her just a little further, and that results in her getting slashed, which backs up the idea that Alicent has completely lost it. They both do a fantastic job here, and as I've already mentioned, I think this is one of the best scenes the show's put together. And there's a part of me that thinks that Otto and Daemon kind of win this scene. The way that they both just stand off to the side and do their internal calculus of how they could use what's happening to their advantage, it all had a classic Game of Thrones appeal to it. In the end, Viserys has said that he wants everyone to make up and pretend like it never happened. We saw how Alicent initially responded to that, but it's Aemond himself who brings everything to a close. He says, "Do not mourn me, mother. It was a fair exchange. I may have lost an eye, but I gained a dragon." And we know where this is coming from on a personal level for him, but it's also a case where he did something that is a lot more important than he realizes for their side. And this is part of what impresses Otto. He goes to see his daughter, and after she recounts everything that was wrong with what happened, he reassures her that they'll come out on top. There will be gossip speculating that she's gone mad. She has assured that her husband's favor will always sort of rest on Rhaenyra, and she says it was an ugly thing that she regrets. But he points out that they play an ugly game, and as much of a scoundrel as he is, she has to feel a little better knowing that he's on her side. Laenor slept through the whole thing, and he wakes up repentant. He tells Rhaenyra that he can do better, that he will do better, and they share a nice moment where he says he hates the gods for making him who he is, but she says that she does not. He's an honorable man with a good heart. This all starts to feel like a final scene with two characters together where they're trying to paint one of them in an appealing light before they get killed off or something along those lines. And this is where they try to pull a twist on people who know the source material. Because in the book, his story ends with him dying as far as you can tell. There are some questions about whether Daemon might have been responsible, but it doesn't play like a situation where he might have faked his own death. So for me, as I'm listening to Rhaenyra and Daemon's conversation, I'm thinking, oh my god, not only did they have him killed, but Rhaenyra played a big part in putting it all together. I suppose if you didn't have that information going into this, then it might not have felt like a twist at all. You see Daemon kill some random high tide guard, him go to Carl with an offer, and then the fight breaks out. about. All of that doesn't really add up, but Rhaenys and Corlys's reactions do a lot of the work of selling it. Of course, at the same time, they're spelling out what they have in mind in voiceover. The only way they can get married is if Laenor is believed to be dead. If that were to happen, everyone will wonder if Rhaenyra was behind it, but that would work to their advantage since their enemies would fear what they were capable of. The only big problem is that the Velaryons will believe that they lost their last living child, right on the back of losing Laena. As we watch their marriage ceremony play out, we're left to believe that they decided that that was worth it, and the episode ends as we get the reveal that it was the guard's dead body that Rhaenys cried over in the fireplace, when we see Laenor escape with Carl to go live an anonymous life somewhere across the narrow sea. From my perspective, this was absolutely entertaining due to the roller coaster of emotions involved in trying to sort out the idea of Rhaenyra killing her husband after they had that conversation. It's almost a shame that there was so much other stuff jammed into this episode to the point that their Valerian-style wedding, which looked super interesting, and the Laenor reveal feels a little shoehorned in there at the end. It did get us to where we needed to go, though, in this first season where things move relentlessly fast. I've had some problems with that, and I definitely feel like at times they are sacrificing a lot of character development in relation to the other characters. And to me, I wondered if they weren't sacrificing that for spectacle and sort of expecting that to cover up the cracks. I think this episode shows that they are capable of balancing that out somewhat. It hasn't been perfect, but I mean, they do know what they have to work with story-wise, and it's possible that they're preparing to become a different show after they get through all the time jumps. There is only one big one left, so I'm willing to withhold judgment until we get there. Maybe we'll get pilot number 3 next week. Overall, everything felt properly deranged across the spectrum from the kids to the adults. The way things played out, it does represent a line being crossed where neither side can go back. Things have conspired in a way that they'll have to fight to protect what they have. And based on the showdown we saw in this episode, that should be pretty entertaining. I mean, spectacle isn't bad in and of itself, so I don't want you to get the wrong idea when I say that there. I just hope that they're able to bring the character-based drama in equal measure. They've managed to make Alicent somewhat sympathetic in spite of her holier-than-thou stance, and Otto a little more intriguing in his playing the game to win, which is no small task. As a fan of George R.R. Martin's work, I'm all in. Seeing all those dragons in one place, and then seeing Vhagar flying away at the end to see the scale of how different they all are. I mean, there's a lot of really fun stuff there for those of us who have been reading these books. The changes have mostly been improvements. I do have some questions about what Laenor's leaving means for his dragon, especially in an episode where so much was made about Aemond bringing Vhagar over to their side. Lore-wise, a dragon wouldn't take another rider unless their previous one had died, so that's something that they'll have to explain if someone else were to claim Sea Smoke. Since Daemon was already on their side, they did lose some firepower as far as dragons go, and I couldn't help but think about how small Rhaenyra's kids' dragons are compared to the others that are already claimed. Two of my favorite things before I wrap it up, Luke's reaction to Corlys telling him he'll be the heir to High Tide was a great way to underline the generational nature of what all these kids find themselves born into. And the way that Rhaenyra and Daemon just casually kill a complete innocent to pull off their plan. While it still has this feeling of, oh, that's nice, Laenor gets to be free as he jumps in the boat to close things out. In this dirty game they play, no one really has clean hands. Just ask Criston Cole, who was well on his way to removing Luke's eye. Some pretty great stuff, and I think that's a good place to leave things. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the episode and about the season so far. If you haven't read the books, where do you think things are going? And if you have, what do you think about the changes that we're seeing? And what did you think about the Laenor twist? If you want to comment with some book spoilers, that's fine. Just mark them and use some line breaks to make sure they show up below the fold so that they won't spoil anybody who hasn't read ahead. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.